Mike DeCourcy's latest bracket, hot off the presses this morning. Still 6 Big Ten teams in the dance as of now. Purdue's a 1 seed. Illinois holds steady as a 4. Wisconsin still a 5. Michigan State's lost to Iowa, dropped them a spot. They're now an 8. Northwestern and Nebraska stay the same from Tuesday's bracket at 9 and 10. And look who is in the first 4 out now, the Iowa Hawkeyes. Mike, let's break this down a little bit, and let's start with Purdue. There have been a lot of talk after the Ohio State game. There are people moving them out of the #1 overall seed. Then UConn goes out and gets blasted by Creighton. So where does it stand between those two? Who do you have as the #1 overall seed right now?
I'm back to Purdue as the 1 overall, in large part because their resume, the difference between their resumes is significant. I mean, UConn's fabulous, and they're going to be one of the 1 seeds. There's no doubt in my mind. They're going to start in Brooklyn and go to Boston if they continue to win, of course. They're fantastic. But their resume does not stand up to Purdue's at this point. Before the loss to Creighton, they could say, well, they only had a couple of defeats, and now Purdue had a bad loss on their resume. But getting beaten badly by Creighton, and then it goes back to me for when you look at the committee's bracket reveal a week ago, Purdue had beaten 6 of the other 15 teams that were in the 4 seed lines, and UConn had beaten 2. And UConn, like I said, has a #1 seed resume, but it's not to Purdue's degree. So without a doubt, to me, that's the 1 overall, unless something happens down the stretch. I think that Purdue can lock up a 1 seed at some level, one of the first 4 seeds, just by winning 2 more games. I don't think they need to do more than that because no other teams out there like Arizona losing on Thursday night to Washington State. Other teams out there aren't going to be able to position themselves to challenge Purdue if they can just get a couple more W's.
Both of those teams with 9 quad 1 wins, but I think to your point, not all quad 1 wins are made the same, and that speaks to the strength of Purdue's resume. Illinois took a bit of a hit on the court. I mean, falling to Penn State this week. Again, that's a quad 2 game. It's not a game that kills your resume in any way. We saw what a good environment that was in State College. Interesting to me, though, they didn't drop at all. So give us a sense of how Illinois was able to hold steady.
Some of that is the absence of strength on the 5 line. The five seeds are not as powerful. You're looking at teams like Kentucky that lost on the road to LSU, so sort of evening out. They had been the 5 at that point, and maybe were in position to climb up because of the Illinois loss, but couldn't hold on at the end and lose to LSU. So elements like that that were significant to Illinois staying on that line. What's interesting is that Illinois' schedule down the stretch doesn't include anybody that doesn't have a chance at this thing or basically has wrapped up a spot like Purdue. So there are lots of opportunities for Illinois to climb higher and some obviously opportunities for them to struggle to hold where they are. 2 Iowas, Minnesota, at Wisconsin and Purdue, that's a lot of challenging teams. Every one of those teams is in the hunt or, like I said, in my field now. So I think that Illinois has a lot of opportunity to dictate where they're going to end up.
Yeah, 2 home games this week, the first of those Iowa games, and then Minnesota as well. Wisconsin righted the ship a bit. They topped Maryland at home. I think their resume is really interesting. I mean, they have 7 quad 1 wins. There are only 3 teams in the country that have more. UConn and Purdue, who we talked about, and Houston as well. And then you look at, they have only played 6 games against teams that are outside of quad 1 and 2, which speaks to the great schedule strength. Is that what has kept them here on the 5 line, despite the fact it's been a little uneven here in the last few weeks?
Yeah, if you look at the other 5 seeds, not the other teams on the 5 line, they each have 4 quad 1 wins, and as you mentioned, the Badgers have 7. So significant difference there in that sense. And you cited the strength of their schedule overall and how they've performed reasonably well against that. And I think that gives Wisconsin the opportunity to climb that a lot of others in this neighborhood, the 4, 5, 6 line, are going to struggle to find. With what Wisconsin has already achieved, they've got a great base. So any achievement they add to that down the stretch, whether it's on their schedule or in the conference tournament could lift them a couple of lines. But they've got to continue to play as they did in the Maryland game. We've seen them struggle recently, not necessarily to play, but just to finish games, to stay ahead. They haven't performed badly in most of those games, but they've got to get W's if they're going to hold where they are or climb on the board, which I think they do have a great chance to do.
Team that, of course, has played in 22 of the last 24 NCAA tourneys, did miss it last year. Michigan State has the longest active streak in the Big Ten, 25 in a row for the Spartans. I know they're still solidly in right now, did have the home loss to Iowa, but still in really good position here, Mike.
Yeah, I think Michigan State just has to be Michigan State down the stretch, which means they'll probably win 2 out of every 3 or 3 out of every 4 and maybe disappoint you a little bit. They'll get in, but I think what they're shaping up right now as is a perfect 8-9 team, a team whose overall accomplishments don't dictate any higher, but that has to be in based on what they've achieved, and that if you think about it, they'll give whoever the opposite in the 8-9 is a great game, and if they win that, they'll give the number 1 seed a challenge, but probably won't beat them. So it's, as we saw a year ago, Illinois, you could see it. It was like a telegraphed pitch that Illinois is going to be an 8-9 type game, that's where they were going to wind up in the bracket. It was so obvious. And right now, Michigan State has the chance to rearrange the narrative on their season, but they've had that chance really for the last month and have never really quite seized that opportunity. It's never too late until it's too late, but right now I see them headed directly toward an 8-9 game.
Right, and then you're a 1 seed who gets a preseason top 5 team were they to win that 8-9 game, which you can imagine whoever the coach is in that matchup might be griping just a little bit. What about Northwestern? Their resume is strange. They are 9-7 against the top 2 quads, which is really fabulous. They have that loss hanging over them against Chicago State, which is somewhat less than fabulous. But the thing that stands out is how much the net absolutely hates them. I mean, it's crazy to me. I guess that's margin of victory. I mean, is that what that's about? It can't be that one game that holds them down that much, is it? Like, what's going on with their net ranking?
Yeah, that dings them, the Chicago State game. That certainly has an impact. But
Right.
It's really more about margin of victory. The net is a predictive metric. I know that they didn't originally, when they designed it, say that's what it is, but that's how it's performed. If you go over time, over the last few years, and you say, okay, at the end of the year, where did Ken Pom have these teams? And like compare the top 20 between the net and Ken Pom, and they were close to identical. They weren't exactly identical, but they were close enough that you can tell that that's what it is. I've never been a fan of having a predictive metric at the heart of the selection process. There are results metrics like Kevin Palga's KPI, ESPN's strength of schedule, that I think something like that should be at the core. It doesn't have to be those two, but something like that should be at the core of the selection process. That should be the defining marker. And then Northwestern wouldn't look like that on the tally that the NCAA puts out every day. They wouldn't have as difficult a ranking. But the committee is supposed to pay greater attention to the record metrics than they do to predictive metrics when they make selections. That's supposed to be the core of it. And in conversations with different people who are involved in the process, that's pretty much how they view it. Now, you can't get into the mind of every committee member and know that for sure, but that's the general theme, that you get in on your record metrics and you get seated on your predictive metrics. That's what they're kind of trying to accomplish. So I think the Wildcats are fine as it is. 19-8, great record, some terrific wins. I think they're in really good shape in that regard, but they can't hurt themselves down the stretch. And every game now is an effort because they're thin.
Let's get into Nebraska, the huge road win for them at Indiana. Not huge in that Indiana is a great team by any stretch, but huge in that they hadn't won a conference road game. And to just show that you can do that, I think, allays any concerns that the selection committee might have that, well, this is just a team that is a creation of its home court advantage. What did that Nebraska win mean to you?
Yeah, that's exactly what it meant. It really dressed up that road record. 1 is a lot different than 2. It just looks so much better. And it's not exactly where they want to be, but they still have a road game or two down the stretch that are winnable. Their entire stretch run is winnable. That's the thing that Nebraska looks at right now. There's not much opportunity for them to achieve the results that would improve their quad metrics, that sort of thing. They are what they are in terms of quad one. It's not going to change. They don't have any quad one games left. So what they have to do now is to continue to perform like they did against IU and get the results down the stretch that will secure themselves in the field. I think they could afford 3-1, but obviously you'd feel much better given the nature of the opposition. Only Minnesota is really in the hunt at this point, and that's a game. It's not a true bubble game yet because Minnesota still has to play its way to the bubble, but it's kind of like that, where you're trying to win for yourself, but you're also trying to do a little damage to the competition. You could really hurt Minnesota's charge, which Minnesota's charge might help the entire league, but as you're sitting there somewhat close to the bubble, it doesn't help you.
No, for sure. And remember, they lost a 17-point lead to the Gophers in Minneapolis earlier this year, so you don't want to get swept by them either. So you touched on Minnesota a little bit. Let's talk about Iowa because they're the ones now on the move into your first four out. Give us a summation of kind of where they are and what they would need to do.
Yeah, they've got Illinois twice, home and road. Ends on the road. Ends at home. They're at Illinois first, and then they go to Illinois at the end. And they also have an at Northwestern. So opportunities there for quad one victories. That's 3 quad one opportunities for them. If they continue to play as they have, they're going to be in those games. They've played really well on offense and have been much more competitive defensively in their last few games. So I think they have a chance. And we talked about Minnesota, not on the bubble yet. I think it's unfair to say that, but great opportunity to climb there. And again, that Minnesota site for the Big Ten tournament could not be better timed for the Gophers.
Right. I do think we tend to forget about that every year, and it's around this time, each time that we talk about the tournament, I say, we know who they're playing the rest of the regular season, but you can get in based on what you do in the conference tourney, and certainly Minnesota with a better opportunity than anyone, given the quasi-home court advantage.